Have you ever thought about what makes you, well, you? I mean, not just your personality or memories, but deep down, what's at the core of your existence? It's a question that sort of sneaks up on me sometimes, especially when everything around feels still and quiet like this. What do you think? Well, here we are, the room's getting quiet now. And you know what's strange? When the world fades out like this, a different sort of journey begins inside your head. Imagine for a moment that your body is like an old ship, constantly being repaired and replaced over time. The question is, would you still be you if every part of you was eventually changed? It's a paradox from ancient times, the ship of Theseus, but it feels so current, doesn't it? Something to ponder as we drift into the night. And here's the thing, this question isn't just about our bodies. It touches on who we are at a deeper level, right down to our very essence. You know how it feels when you're in the dark? Like there's this vastness around you and your mind expands into all that space. That's what we're heading into now, a kind of journey where everything you thought was solid might start to shift. It's dark and it can feel a bit scary. But there's beauty in this uncertainty too, like the ocean under moonlight, vast and mysterious. So let's explore together tonight. Let your thoughts float with you into these deeper waters of selfhood. Imagine you're lying here just like this and every part of your body starts to change, slowly over time. Like a ship that's been at sea so long it's had to replace its wooden planks one by one. The Ship of Theseus is this old Greek story about an ancient ship, rebuilt over centuries. Every part was replaced, yet people still called it the same ship. So here's a question. If every piece of your body were to change gradually, bones healing, skin regenerating, would you still be you? It feels like the same ship, but how can we be sure? What makes us who we are? Is it just our physical form or something deeper? You know, you could think of your memories as parts too. If they slowly changed over time, would that affect who you are? Here's a thought, if someone had all the same memories and experiences as you but wasn't actually you, could they be considered you? There's something fascinating about this idea, don't you think? That your sense of self might not just lie in the physical. It feels like a deep water exploration. We're diving into what makes us who we are beyond the surface, beyond our skin and bones. So if every part of you were replaced over time, would you still be you? You remember how we talked about the Ship of Theseus last time? We wondered if you would still be you if every part of your body was replaced over time. Now let's take that a step further, shall we? Imagine you're stepping into a teleporter. It scans your entire body and mind in excruciating detail down to the last molecule. Then it sends all that information across space and recreates you exactly as you are on Mars or Jupiter or wherever. So there's a perfect copy of you, right? Now which one is the real you? The one that stayed here or the new you on another planet? It's a question Derek Parfit explored. He proposed this thought experiment to challenge our ideas about continuity and identity. If the new you has all your memories, experiences, and feelings, does it matter if it's in another place? You know what's strange? The new you would feel like you, have all the same thoughts and wouldn't know anything was different. The original you might even cease to exist once the information is sent. So where does that leave us? You start to wonder if identity isn't as fixed and concrete as we think it is. If a perfect copy of you can be created and yet still feel like you, does that mean our sense of self is just an illusion? We're getting into deep waters now, aren't we? It feels a bit unsettling to think about. But isn't it fascinating how our minds can play tricks on us like this? Maybe what we're calling the self is just a collection of experiences, memories, and thoughts. If they can be recreated exactly somewhere else, does that mean you're not as unique or fixed in time as you might think? Here's the thing, this raises questions about what we value most about ourselves. Is it our body, our mind, or something else entirely? If you're just a bundle of memories and experiences, can someone else be you if they have those same memories and experiences? And what about change? If the self isn't fixed but changes over time, does that mean there's no true self to begin with? You might start to see your life as a river, flowing and changing constantly. Sometimes it feels like you're the same person from day to day. But if we zoom out, you can see how much you've changed over years or decades. You aren't exactly the same person you were 5 or 10 years ago. Is it possible that all of ourselves are just different versions of us, like chapters in a book? And if that's the case, where does identity come from? Is it something we create, or is it an illusion we're all living with? There are so many layers to this question. It feels like a puzzle that's never quite solved. But maybe the act of questioning is what matters most. Maybe it's the journey itself, not reaching some final answer about who you are. Remember when we talked about Parfit's teleporter and how it challenges our idea of self? Well, let's think about something else now. How much do you rely on your memories to know who you are? Imagine floating in a sea of memories. Each one is like an island that represents different moments of your life. Some islands are big with lots of details. Others might be smaller, just vague impressions. Now think about how you travel from one island to the next. Each step you take is a connection between your past and present self. But what if some islands are missing? What if parts of your memory fade away? Do you lose a part of yourself when you forget something important from the past? What if someone could reconstruct all your memories perfectly, but without your body? Would that person be you? Let's take a step back. Imagine for a moment that your memories are like pieces of a puzzle. Each piece has its own shape and color, but it's only when they're all together that you get the full picture. But what happens if some pieces are missing? Can the puzzle still be complete without them? And then there's the question of how memories change over time. They're not static, they shift and fade. Some memories grow sharper with age, while others blur into vague outlines. It's as if the puzzle pieces themselves are melting and reforming in new shapes. The image is still there, but it's never quite the same. So here we have this strange situation where you can be both yourself and not yourself at the same time. If memories are so central to your identity, what happens when those memories change? Do you still feel like the same person? What if you don't remember a key part of who you used to be? Here's another way to think about it. Imagine your memories are like shadows cast by events in your life. These shadows shift as the light changes, and sometimes they can fade entirely into darkness. But even when the shadow fades, you're still there. The question is, are you the same person without that shadow? Now let's consider this. What if all your memories were perfect copies of someone else's? Would they be yours then? Would you still feel like yourself? Or would the essence of who you are be something entirely different? What if those memories were from someone else's life, but they felt as real to you as your own? Could that be a part of what makes up the you in you? It's like looking into a mirror and seeing someone else staring back at you, but feeling as though it's your reflection. Now think about how much we rely on memory to make decisions, to form opinions, to interact with the world around us. What if you woke up one day and none of your memories were yours? How would that change who you are? Would you still feel like yourself without those memories? Or would you be someone else entirely? This isn't just a hypothetical question. It's something we all face as our lives change and evolve. You grow older, you learn new things, you meet different people. Each of these changes the puzzle that is your life. What if one day you looked at yourself in the mirror and didn't recognize who was looking back? Would that be a sign of an entirely new person, or just another chapter in your evolving story? It's like you're always on the cusp of becoming someone else, and yet somehow still the same. And here's a thought, maybe it's not about whether you stay the same or change. Maybe it's about accepting that both can be true at once. What if being you is more like a river, constantly flowing and changing shape but always there? The water may not be the same from one moment to the next, yet it's still the same river. So how do you define yourself? Is there a core you that remains constant, or are you always becoming someone new? Is the self just an illusion, built on layers of memories and experiences that shift with time? And if you're always changing, how can you truly know who you are? What if the only way to be you is to accept that every version of yourself is valid and real? So now, as you drift into sleep, think about all these ideas. Are your memories the key to who you are? Or is there something deeper, something that connects all versions of yourself, no matter how different they seem? You remember how we talked about memories and identity in the last chapter? Well, now let's think about something even more mind-bending. Imagine if your brain could be split into two separate minds that both carry your memories and personality. What would that mean for who you are? This is like the thought experiment of brain fission, where a person's consciousness is divided, each part continuing to exist as its own entity. Would they both be you, or would you cease to exist? It feels like we're pushing the limits of what it means to have a self, doesn't it? You know how the ship of Theseus raises questions about identity over time? Well, this takes it further by splitting that identity in two. Imagine waking up and finding out there's another you walking around, thinking your thoughts, having your memories. Would they be you too, or would one of them not really be you? And here's the thing, if both are equally you, does that mean there's no single core to your identity? That everything is just a collection of experiences and memories? You know how it feels when you're drifting in the dark, thinking about who you are. Does that sense of self dissolve into something more fluid and complex? What if we're just a bundle of memories and experiences? And when they're split, the you is two. It's almost like you're made up of many smaller yous. It's hard not to feel a little unsettling about this. If identity can be split, what does it mean for the rest of us? Does anyone really have an unbreakable self? So here you are in the dark, maybe thinking about these ideas. It's okay if your mind feels a little swirled around now. That's part of the journey. Remember when we talked about brain fission and how it made us wonder if identity can be split? Well, today, let's imagine something else. What happens when you're perfectly duplicated? Think of a perfect copy, not just in appearance, but also in memories and thoughts. Do we have two versions of the same self? How do we determine which one is the real you? You know how it feels when someone mirrors your actions, almost as if they're reading your mind. It's like a shadow of yourself, but what if that shadow became solid? What would that say about identity? There are philosophers who argue that if there were two perfect duplicates, they'd both be equally real. It's a thought experiment that questions the very idea of an original self. Imagine waking up to find your perfect copy sitting beside you. How would it feel? Would you think, who is the real me? Or could both of you be equally you? What if we were more like a river than a solid object? A river changes over time but remains the same river. Could identity be something fluid, not just psychological continuity? There's a theory that identity is less about being the original and more about being part of an ongoing narrative. So if you were duplicated, both could continue your story in different ways. The idea of duplication challenges us to think about what we truly value when it comes to personal identity. Is it the body, the memories, or something else entirely? Consider this. If you were duplicated, would both of you be equally real in your experiences and thoughts? Could there be two of you living different lives but sharing the same essence? It's a strange thought, isn't it? That something so personal as identity could be shared or duplicated. Yet here we are, exploring this idea and questioning what makes us who we are. And maybe that's the point. Identity isn't just about being one specific self, but recognizing the fluidity of experience. It's a journey, not a fixed destination. So as we drift into sleep tonight, let's hold onto this idea that perhaps identity is less about who you are and more about the story you're living. And maybe there's room for multiple versions of that story. Last time we talked about duplicating a person and how it challenges our sense of identity. And here's the thing, if you were duplicated, would your soul be copied too, or does the soul remain uniquely yours? Let's think about this idea of a soul for a moment. You know how it's often seen as the essence of who you are, beyond just your memories or body. But can something so intangible really define your identity? Imagine if there was a machine that could transfer not only your physical self, but also your soul. What would happen to the original you? Would both versions be equally you? In many ways, we're like islands in a vast ocean, each with its own unique shape and story. But what if this island has more than one peak? What does that say about the soul? You know what's strange? If your body changes over time, so do your thoughts and memories. So why would a soul be any different? Isn't it just as fluid? Think about how you feel today compared to years ago. You've changed, right? But is there something that remains constant beneath all those changes? Is that the soul? And yet, it's hard not to imagine a soul as something fixed and unchanging. It's like a beacon in the dark of night, guiding you through life. But what if this beacon is more like a lighthouse? Bright and steady from afar, but up close, it's just a complex machine with many moving parts. Maybe the soul isn't one single entity at all. Maybe it's more like an echo of everything you've been and done. So back to duplication. If a machine could copy your body and mind exactly, would the soul be part of that? Or is it something else entirely? Last night we talked about the soul as a core of identity. Now let's think about something else. Imagine your life as a river flowing from birth to now. Each experience is like water merging into it, shaping its course. What makes this river you? Is it the water itself, or is it something more subtle, like the path that guides the flow? This idea of a river brings us to psychological continuity. Just like how a river retains its identity despite changing waters, you remain you through different experiences and memories. But what happens if you split the river? Would each stream still be part of the original river? Does that change how we think about identity? It's not just about splitting. Think about a river widening, narrowing, even looping back on itself. Is it still fundamentally the same river? Imagine your thoughts and memories as these changes in the river. They're what give you depth, they shape who you are. There's something strange about this idea though, isn't there? If memory is so crucial to our sense of self, what happens when we forget? The river dries up in some parts, but it still flows elsewhere. Does that mean you've lost a part of yourself? We've talked about memory as crucial to identity, but how much does the present moment matter too? Are we just our memories, or are we more than that? Think of your current self as a leaf floating on this river. You're both part of it and separate from it. So is the leaf an essential part of the river, or is it just along for the ride? Here's something to ponder. What if the river and the leaf are one and the same? What does that say about identity? We've been on this journey together, thinking about how our sense of self is more than just memories or a physical body. And here's the thing, it feels like we're getting closer to something deeper. You remember when we talked about the ship of Theseus, how you could replace every part of a ship and still call it the same ship? Well, there's a parallel in how we change over time. But what if that idea isn't enough to explain who you really are? What if your sense of self is more like the flow of a river, constantly changing but still somehow the same. You see, if identity is just about continuity, psychological or physical, it starts to feel like we're trapped in this idea that we need to be consistent over time. But what if there's more? What if the concept of a self isn't about being constant, but about something else entirely? Imagine you have a story that you tell yourself every day. It helps you understand who you are, right? But what happens if one day the story changes? There's something strange about how we hold onto these stories so tightly when they're just narratives, not necessarily facts. You know what I mean. And yet, it feels important to have some sense of who you are, even if that sense is evolving all the time. Now think about this. What would happen if we didn't need a stable self at all? What if our identity was more like water, always changing but still connected? This is where it gets really interesting. If you're not just your memories or your body, then what are you? What makes you feel like you're the same person over time? We've been circling around this idea of identity as something fluid and shifting. Think back on those earlier chapters, the ship of Theseus, teleportation, memory islands. There's a deep question here about how we perceive ourselves, both internally and externally. Now let's dive deeper into reflection itself. How do you see yourself? Do you use mirrors to catch your own gaze, or is it more like an internal mirror, a self-reflection from within? When you look in the mirror, what do you see? Is that you? Or is it just a reflection of your body, not the core essence of who you are inside? There's something almost paradoxical about looking at yourself in this way. You're trying to grasp an image, but it's fleeting like a river flowing past. And here's the thing, you can't really hold onto that reflection, can you? It changes with every moment, just like the water in a stream. What if your sense of identity is more like a river too? Not a fixed point, but something constantly flowing and changing. We've spoken before about psychological continuity, how memories shape our identity. But what if there's an ever-changing aspect to this river that doesn't just rely on past recollections, but also the present moment? So we're back to a question. What makes you feel like you, if not just your memories or physical form? Is there something more fluid and ever-shifting construct of self? And here's another layer to consider. Your identity might also be shaped by the narratives you tell yourself, stories that give your life meaning and coherence. These stories are like a series of reflections, each one creating an image of who you think you are. But what happens when those stories change? Last time we talked about reflections and mirrors, both external and internal. We asked if there was a true you or just an ever-shifting construct. Today, let's think about all the paths not taken. What if you could go back to key moments in your life and choose differently? Would that change who you are? Imagine yourself as a river flowing through different landscapes, changing shape and form with each bend. Now think about all the other paths it could have taken along the way. Jorge Luis Borges once wrote about this idea in The Garden of Forking Paths. He imagined a labyrinth where each decision you make creates a new path. Every time you choose, you create multiple versions of yourself. So how do these paths affect who you are? Can the choices you didn't make influence your sense of self? You know that feeling when you think about what could have happened if you'd made a different choice. You start to imagine an alternate version of yourself living in another world, doing something entirely different. It's like looking through the window of a train and seeing different towns that you could have stopped at but didn't. Each town represents a version of yourself that never came to be. But there's something strange about this feeling, right? It makes you wonder if your identity is somehow tied up with all these different versions of yourself, even the ones that didn't happen. Now imagine a river splitting into two. One branch flows towards the sea and the other dries up in the desert. Both streams started from the same source, but they end so differently. In a way, it's like you've got these different versions of yourself, like branches off a river. Each one flows along its own path, leading to a distinct future. But what if those paths didn't diverge? What if they were all still flowing together, somewhere in the vast river of time? You know what's strange? How much of our identity is shaped by how we perceive the world around us. Like, if you think about it, are you really who you believe yourself to be, or just someone shaped by your perceptions? Imagine a river flowing through a canyon. The shape of the canyon influences how the water moves, right? Well, our minds are like that river, and the world around us is the canyon. It's as if we're always looking through a glass window. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes foggy. The clarity of this window changes how we see ourselves and others. And here's the thing, what happens when that window distorts? How do you know if your identity is a true reflection or just a skewed image? Take, for example, the ship of Theseus paradox. What makes you you could be that distorted window through which we see our memories and experiences. But then again, what if perception itself is what defines us? Imagine if every time you looked at something or someone, the act of perceiving it altered your sense of self. It's like a mirror reflecting not just your image, but also the light and shadows around you. You're who you are because of how you perceive the world and vice versa. So in a way, every time you look out at the world, you're also looking inward, aren't you? And what if we're not just perceiving ourselves through our own eyes, but also through how others see us? Are we who they think we are or who we think we are? You know, it's like when you look at a painting. The colors and shapes form an image that changes depending on where you stand. Your identity is the same way. But then there's this other question. If our identity is so malleable, how do we find a sense of stability? If everything around us can change, what remains constant? There's something interesting here. What if the core self is not just about memory or psychological continuity, but also this fluid perception of ourselves and our world? You know, it feels like we're constantly in motion, like a river flowing through the landscape of our experiences and perceptions. And here's what I'm wondering. How much do these alternative paths, the ones not taken, shape who we are by shaping how we see ourselves? It's like there's this constant dance between the river and its canyon. The way it flows is both a result of and a shaper of its surroundings. Let's pick up where we left off with perception shaping our sense of self. You know, it's like a labyrinth full of twists and turns, and every path you take changes how you see yourself. Each twist is an experience, each turn a new perception. Imagine walking through this maze. There's no clear map or exit sign, just a series of choices that lead to different rooms with mirrors reflecting various versions of you. What if we consider each mirror a snapshot of who you are at a particular moment? The reflections aren't fixed. They change as the light and your position shift. You're not just one person, but many. And here's something interesting. Even if you move through the labyrinth at a slow pace, the reflections might still be different because of how your perception has evolved. You're both continuous and ever-changing. Now think about this. When you emerge from one part of the maze into another, do you feel like a different person? Or is there still something constant within you that remains unchanged? In some rooms, the mirrors might be fogged up or broken. In others, they're crystal clear, reflecting every detail of your current self. It's like how our perceptions can sometimes distort who we think we are. And here's another twist. What if you encountered a room with no mirrors at all? Would you still be able to recognize yourself without external reflections? You're not just navigating through physical space, but also through time. Each step forward is another moment in your life, altering how you see and perceive the world around you. In a way, we're all like travelers in this labyrinth of identity, seeking to understand ourselves more deeply with each step. And here's the thing, it's not just about finding your way out. It's about exploring all the different paths and seeing how they change you. Every time you encounter a mirror or take a new turn, it alters who you are in that moment. But there's something deeper, too, something constant beneath the shifting perceptions and reflections. You know what's strange? The more we try to define ourselves through these external mirrors, the harder it becomes to see our true selves. We get lost in the reflections. Remember when we talked about the ship of Theseus and how your identity isn't just about physical form or memories? Well, now let's think about all those stories that echo within us. Stories that society tells you and ones you tell yourself. You're more than the sum of your parts, right? But what about these narratives? They shape how we see ourselves, don't they? Imagine for a moment that you're in a big hall filled with echoes. Each echo is a story, and as it bounces around the walls, it changes slightly each time. And here's the thing, these stories are always there, shaping you from within. But how much of who you think you are is just an echo? It's like standing in front of a mirror that shows not your reflection, but the stories you've been told over and over again. Now think about this. Can these echoes ever be truly authentic? Or are they just shadows cast by someone else's light? What happens when you start to question the authenticity of these stories? Do you lose something important about yourself, or do you find a new way to be real? There's this idea that our sense of self is like water flowing in a river. But what if some of the water isn't actually part of the current, but rather an echo from elsewhere? We've talked about mirrors and reflections before, haven't we? How they help shape who you think you are. Well, these echoes can be like that too. But here's the thing, when you turn off all those echoing stories, what remains? Is there a constant core that stays behind? In some ways, it's like standing in a garden where every path not taken could have shaped you differently. But the echoes of past stories still ring out. You know what's strange? The idea that our sense of self can be so malleable, yet we hold onto these stories as if they're the only truth. So here you are, caught between the weight of all these narratives and the lightness of what might be true beneath them. And maybe that's where your real self lies. But can we ever truly understand ourselves without understanding how we perceive, without seeing past the echoes? Remember where we left off. The echoes of societal and personal narratives shaping our identity, right? Well, now let's think about how time itself affects who we feel we are. You know those moments when you look back at an old photo or a journal entry from years ago. You might catch yourself thinking, is that really me? It's like the person in that picture is someone else. But it's you, isn't it? It feels strange, doesn't it? So here's something interesting. Do we really feel like the same self throughout our lives, or is each stage a new version of you? Think about it this way. Imagine you're in a river, and as the water flows past, it's always moving but still part of that same stream. That's like how we feel our identity changes over time. We're still flowing in the river of life, but each moment feels a bit different from the last one. And here's another thought. What if who you are now is just as much an echo of past moments as those old photos or journal entries? You're always changing, growing, and adapting. Each moment leaves a mark on the next one, kind of like ripples spreading across water. So when you look back at those old moments, maybe it's not just about remembering who you were. It's also recognizing how much you've changed and grown since then. And that change is what makes us feel alive, isn't it? The feeling of always becoming someone new, even as we hold onto our past experiences. But here's where it gets tricky. How do you know which version of yourself is the real one? The child, the teenager, the adult? Is there a constant core beneath all these shifting layers? Or are we just a series of connected moments, each as real and true as the last? It's like being in a room with many mirrors. Each reflection shows you differently, but they're all still you. The question is, how do we find that constant amidst the ever-changing reflections? And here's a thought. Maybe what feels like our constant Self isn't so much a solid thing as it is a story we tell ourselves about who we are and where we're going. So if the self is a narrative, how do we know which parts of our story are true, which memories are real, and what happens to us when that story changes? You know what's strange? We feel like we're the same person from childhood to adulthood, but in many ways we've changed so much. Is that a good thing or not? Change can be scary sometimes, but it's also what keeps us going, isn't it? So as time passes and we keep changing, how do you feel about that change? Is it something to embrace or fear? And here's the thing, if identity is a story we tell ourselves, then can anyone else ever truly know our narrative? If our sense of self is so fluid and constantly changing, does that mean there's no true self at all? Or just a series of evolving stories? And what if the story we tell ourselves isn't even about who we are right now, but who we want to be in the future? So here you are, lying there in the dark with these questions swirling around your head. How do we navigate all of this? And what does it mean for who we really are? It's a lot to think about, isn't it? But it's also pretty amazing. The complexity of identity, the fluidity of self. And so we drift on this river of time and change, trying to understand what makes us who we are, one moment at a time. So here we are again, you and me, exploring this idea of who we are and how we see ourselves. It's like a conversation that never ends, just keeps on flowing, doesn't it? You know what I've been thinking about lately? How much society shapes our sense of self. The labels we wear, the roles we play, they're like clothes that fit us perfectly and yet don't feel entirely ours. Think about it, you're a mother, a father, a doctor, an artist. These are all titles, right? But they also shape how we see ourselves and how others see us too. And here's the thing. Do these labels define who you truly are, or are they just a reflection of the stories society tells about different roles? It's like a river flowing through a city. The city builds walls and bridges, but it doesn't change where the water comes from or how it flows. Now think about this. If you took away all those labels and roles, would who you are still be there? You know, it's like when you're a child and someone asks what you want to be when you grow up. It's never really about the job, it's about the feeling that comes with it. And there's something interesting here. How much of our identity is a reflection of what we want others to see versus who we truly are? Sometimes you look in the mirror and it feels like you're seeing someone else. Like there's this gap between the person society expects you to be and who you really want to be. But then again, maybe that's part of the journey too. Maybe it's about finding that balance between what others see and what you truly feel deep inside. You know what I mean? There's a dance going on here between these labels and who we really are. It's like a shadow play where the light from society casts shapes that shift with our true selves. So what happens when you strip away all those roles? When you peel back the layers of society's expectations and look at yourself in pure light? What remains is that core essence, isn't it? The one part of you that's always been there, no matter what labels come and go. And here's the question I keep coming back to. If society gives us these identities, do we truly own them? Or are they just costumes in a play that's not quite our own? It feels like there's something under all of this. Something deeper, more constant. Like a river flowing through different landscapes but still being the same water. And as you drift here in the darkness, maybe you're beginning to see that too. That beneath all these roles and labels is a self that's more fluid than we sometimes realize. So where do you go from here? How much of who you are is determined by society, and how much is your own unique essence? You know, we've talked a lot about memory and labels and how they shape who we are. But there's something else that plays a huge role in our sense of self: other people. The way others see us and interact with us can feel like it defines parts of our identity. It's like we're mirrors to each other, reflecting back what we project out into the world. And sometimes, those reflections are so vivid that they become a part of how we see ourselves. Think about it this way: if you were an island and everyone around you was the ocean, would your shape be defined by the waves crashing against your shores? Do they mold who you are? Here's another metaphor. Imagine that we're all parts of a vast tapestry, each one of us contributing our unique threads to the larger picture. Without the surrounding threads, would your thread be complete? We talked before about how societal roles and labels can shape us. But it's not just those broad strokes, it's also the day-to-day interactions with individuals who know you intimately. So what happens if those connections are lost? Do we lose a part of ourselves when someone else isn't there to reflect us? It's like being in a dark room with only one light. You know the shape and size of the light, but it takes another light to truly see its dimensions. The question is, are we really who we think we are without these reflections? Do our identities depend on the eyes and ears of others? And if that's true, then what happens when those mirrors change or break? How do we redefine ourselves? We've talked about the ship of Theseus and how your identity might be fluid. But if others play a role in shaping who you are, does that mean they're part of the ship too? There's something both beautiful and unsettling about this idea that we're all connected in such a fundamental way, but it also leaves us vulnerable. The vulnerability comes from knowing that our sense of self is, to some extent, dependent on others' perceptions and interactions. We're not just islands or threads, we're both. It's like being in a dance where the steps change based on who you're dancing with, but also how they see you moving. You know, this really makes me wonder. You remember waking up this morning, feeling like you were still in a dream. That's not unusual, right? But it made me think about how much of ourselves exists only in dreams. What if the person we are when we're asleep is just as real as the one we are now? And here's the thing, you know those times you wake up from a vivid dream and it feels like you've lived through something profound? Well, what if that version of yourself was just as real as your waking self? In the dream, you might do things or think thoughts you'd never consider in the waking world. But there's no denying those experiences shape who you are, even if only a little. Think about it like a river flowing into two streams. One stream is your waking life, the other is dreams. They diverge but share the same source. Do they not both contribute to who you are? You know how it feels when you wake up from a nightmare or a dream that was so vivid, it lingered with you throughout the day. It's almost like those parts of your identity have been touched by something beyond the ordinary. You're not just who you are in waking life. You're also who you are when you're dreaming, aren't you? And here's something else. What if the dream self is actually more authentic, more connected to your true essence than the waking self constrained by societal roles and labels? Well, think about it. In dreams, you're not bound by expectations or fears of judgment. You can explore different versions of yourself freely. Is that version any less real than the waking self? It's like stepping into a mirror and finding someone else looking back at you, but it feels familiar in an odd way. Maybe the dream self is not just a reflection of the waking self, but its own entity with its own story to tell. An alternative version of you, living out different possibilities and realities. We've talked about dreams and their connection to identity, haven't we? Now let's turn our attention to memories, how they shape who you think you are. Memories feel so real, like stones in a river of time. But what if some of those stones aren't as solid as we believe? Imagine you're walking through your memories from childhood to now. Each memory feels like it's part of a single story, your life narrative. But what if some of those memories are just echoes of stories others have told about you? Could these tales become your own? There's something strange here, isn't there? Our sense of self is built on the past we remember. But if some memories are just borrowed stories, what does that mean for who you think you are? And here's the thing, memories aren't always accurate. They can be altered, twisted by time and retelling. You know how a story changes when it's told over and over? Well, that happens with our own memories too. But if your memories aren't always true to the events themselves, does this mean you're not who you think you are? Or is it possible that even fabricated memories can shape who you become? Let's think about a memory from your childhood. Maybe it's something small, like the taste of grandma's cookies. Now, what if that memory isn't actually yours, but one you've imagined based on stories? Does that cookie still define part of who you are? It's like building a house with stones that aren't always real. The structure might not be perfect, but it's still your home. So too with our memories, even if they're partly fiction, they still make up the foundation of who we are. Here's something interesting. Researchers have found that people can create false memories without realizing it. They might remember a childhood event that never happened. Maybe they saw a photograph or heard someone tell the story so many times. So you're not just who your actual experiences have made you, but also who these imagined memories have shaped you to be. It's a bit mind-bending, isn't it? You know what's strange? Even if some of our memories aren't true, they can still influence us deeply. They shape how we see the world and who we think we are. There's a river metaphor that works well here. Imagine your memories as stones in this river of time. Some stones are solid from events you actually experienced, but others might be softer, like pebbles formed by stories and imagination. And yet, even the softer stones have weight. They affect how the river flows around them, shaping its course, just like your memories shape you, whether true or imagined. So here's a question that might linger in the darkness. Can we truly understand ourselves without acknowledging how these imagined memories contribute to our sense of self? If you're feeling unsettled by this, it's okay. This is part of a deeper exploration into the nature of identity and memory. There's beauty in recognizing that even if our memories aren't always true to life, they still hold immense power over who we are. They're a part of the tapestry that makes up you. And yet, this realization also raises questions about whether there's something more foundational to our identity beyond these memories, true or imagined. What could that be? Let's start where we left off last night, those memories, real or imagined, shaping who you think you are. But what if I told you that maybe there isn't a you at all? Just a series of moments and thoughts that flow together like a river. You know, it's fascinating how we hold onto this idea of being a constant self. We think there's something unchanging within us, but what if that's just another story we tell ourselves? Imagine for a moment you're standing on the banks of a river. You look at it and think, that's me flowing from one moment to the next. But is that really who you are? Or maybe you're more like a wave on that river. Each wave has its own shape and movement, but it's always changing, merging with others, disappearing into the flow. So if we are waves constantly shifting, what is it that gives us a sense of continuity? Is it our memories or something deeper? What if instead of being the river itself, you're more like the water molecules in that flow? They move together, but are always changing and mixing with others. It's an interesting idea, isn't it? That our sense of self is just a collection of moments, each one different from the last. It makes you wonder if there really is something that stays the same. And here's the thing, even in those moments when you feel most like yourself, are you truly the same person as before? Maybe it's not about being constant. Maybe it's more about how we change and adapt over time, how our sense of self evolves. What if the river isn't just flowing, but also changing direction, bending around rocks and trees? That's who you are, always adapting to your surroundings. And what about those moments when you feel like a completely different person than before? What does that say about continuity? It's almost as if the idea of being constant is just another story we tell ourselves to feel more grounded. What do you think? Are there really different versions of yourself, or are they all part of one continuous flow? It's hard to shake the idea that we're something more than a series of moments. But what if that's precisely who you are, just a collection of experiences and thoughts, always changing? What remains when all those stories and memories fade away? Is there something deeper, more foundational to your sense of self? It's a profound thought, isn't it? That our identity might not be as solid or fixed as we imagine, more like the river flowing without ever being the same. Maybe that's what life is about, embracing the constant change and finding peace in the idea of not staying the same. And so, as you drift off to sleep tonight, consider this. What if there really isn't a you at all? Just a series of moments and thoughts flowing together in the river of time. You remember that old river metaphor we've been using? Well, it's like this. What if our sense of self is just a ripple on that water, changing and moving with each passing moment? It's not static, but something fluid, shifting under the surface. And here's the thing, if our identity is like these ripples, then what remains when the water is still? What stays after all those waves have passed? Well, imagine you're sitting by that river late at night. The surface of the water is calm, almost like a mirror reflecting the moonlight above. Now think about this. What if your sense of self was just as transient as that reflection in the water? What if it's just a fleeting image that can disappear in an instant? You've probably felt like you're changing all the time. Each new experience, each memory, even something as small as a conversation with someone else, these are all ripples that disturb the surface. And yet, when we talk about identity, it's almost like we're looking for something solid beneath all of this. Something that doesn't change. But what if there isn't anything solid? What if everything is just a series of moments, each one different from the last? It's like standing in a garden where the paths keep changing. You can never walk down the same path twice because it's always shifting under your feet. You know what's strange? Even though everything keeps changing, we still feel like there's something constant about ourselves. Some core that remains no matter how much we change or grow. Maybe it's just a story we tell ourselves to make sense of all these shifting moments. So what is this core we feel? Is it really there, or is it something we create in our minds, an illusion that gives us a sense of continuity? Think about those moments when you felt most like yourself. Do they feel different each time, like a new version of your story is unfolding? If our identity is this fluid, constantly changing thing, then what remains when all the stories fade away? What's left after we've told them all and they're gone? Maybe that's a question without an answer. Maybe there isn't anything left, just an endless stream of moments flowing into one another. You know, we've been thinking about this self as something singular and continuous, right? But what if it's not one thing but many pieces put together like a mosaic? Imagine you're looking at a big picture made of tiny tiles. Each tile is an experience, a memory, a feeling, all contributing to the whole image. And just like in a mosaic, if one piece shifts or disappears, the overall picture changes slightly. But it's still you, right? It's like a river flowing through many landscapes, each changing how it looks and moves, but always being that same river. You're not just one piece of this puzzle, but all the pieces combined. And maybe there's no single you at its core, only the sum of its parts. What if your identity is a collection of stories you tell about yourself? Each story adds another tile to the mosaic of who you are. And these stories change over time. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago, yet you feel connected to that past self somehow. It's like each moment is a new piece in this mosaic of your life. Some pieces fit tightly together, while others are loose and can shift around. So when we talk about identity, maybe it's not so much about finding one constant self, but understanding the complexity of all these shifting pieces. And here's something interesting. What if your different selves are more like islands in a sea, each connected by bridges and currents? This image of islands suggests that while you're interconnected, each island can still be its own distinct entity with unique characteristics. Think about your different roles in life: parent, friend, worker. Each role might feel like a separate self, yet you recognize them as parts of the same person. What if these islands are not just connected, but also in constant flux? The bridges between them can change, grow stronger or weaker over time. This idea of a mosaic or islands helps us understand the multiplicity within our identity, but it still leaves us with questions about what holds all these pieces together. Is there something deeper that ties all these islands and tiles into one coherent self? Or is the self just an illusion, a story we tell ourselves to make sense of our complex lives? And if it's an illusion, what does that mean for how we live our lives and relate to others? Is there any way to truly know or understand another person when their identity is so fluid? Here's the thing, it feels a bit unsettling, doesn't it? To think that you might be this complex mix of shifting identities rather than one constant self. But maybe this complexity is what makes life rich and meaningful. Each tile or island brings its own color, shape, and story to the mosaic that is your existence. In a way, you're not just one person but many, and each of these selves contributes to making you who you are in this moment. So here's the question left hanging. Can there be a singular self when your identity is so multifaceted and ever-changing? Remember that mosaic we talked about last time, the pieces of identity all fitting together in this beautiful, intricate pattern? Well, let's think about what happens when some of those pieces start to fade away. Like a fading photo, the colors don't just disappear, they shift and change. So imagine that each piece, each memory or story is like a leaf on a tree. As seasons pass, leaves fall, but new ones grow. There's always something there, shifting and changing. And here's the thing, when you let go of holding onto those pieces tightly, what do you find? Do you find a deeper self that wasn't obscured by all those details? It's like peeling back layers of an onion. One layer at a time, and eventually, what's left is just the core, or perhaps nothing but the essence of air. Think about it this way. If you were to sit in silence and let your thoughts drift away, would there still be a self left? Would there still be something, or would it all just dissolve into the quiet? It's as if our identities are like whispers in a wind. You hear them for a moment and then they're gone, replaced by another whisper. There's something strangely beautiful about letting go of the need to be constant or unchanging. It's like releasing a bird from its cage. It flies away, but you're free too. What if this fluidity isn't something to fear, but rather a natural state of being? Like the water in a river that never stays still but is always flowing. So tonight, just let those pieces drift away. Let them go with the current and see what's left when they fade into the darkness. Think about how your identity feels like a river flowing over time. It changes its course, but you still feel connected to that flow. And here's the thing, what happens when this river starts to slow down and quiet? It's a beautiful moment of release. You've been exploring the idea of yourself as a fluid collection of moments, and it's starting to feel like letting go of those fixed notions can be liberating. Imagine standing by this river, watching the water slow and settle into stillness. There's a quiet beauty in that moment when it feels like everything pauses. This feeling of letting go is like releasing the grip on each memory or story you've told yourself about who you are. It's an invitation to rest in that pause, to feel at peace with this moment. It's not about losing your identity. It's more like stepping back from the constant flow and realizing there's a depth beneath all those stories. A quiet, still place where you can be at rest. Sometimes in that stillness, it feels as though everything has faded away. But what remains is this deep sense of presence, a feeling of being right here and now without the need to define yourself. Is there something foundational beyond these shifting stories? It's a question that lingers softly in the background, and it's okay if we don't have an answer right now. What remains when all the narratives and memories fade away? You might feel like you're floating, not sure where to anchor your sense of self. But there's a calm in that uncertainty too. Think about this quiet pause as a moment of reflection and rest. It's a chance to let go of all the labels and stories, even if just for now, and simply be here in this stillness. There's something beautiful about that dissolution into rest. It's not giving up on who you are, it's embracing a deeper understanding of yourself beyond the stories and narratives. Now think about this. When all your thoughts and stories fade away, what remains? The question lingers softly in the quiet of night. It's as if we're letting go of something we've clung to for so long. There's a sense of release, like stepping out into open water and feeling the weightlessness of the moment. Maybe what remains is this quiet space within us. And here's the thing, there's beauty in letting go of that constant need to define ourselves. It feels like stepping into a river and just allowing it to carry you. So as we drift towards sleep, what if the dissolution isn't an ending but a beginning? A beginning of something new, unspoken. Maybe it's in this quiet that we can truly find who we are. Not through stories or memories, but simply by being here now. You know what's strange? We often seek identity outside ourselves through experiences and relationships. But what if it's just this quiet stillness that truly matters? It's like the silence between notes in a song or the pause after a word. The space itself can be as meaningful as anything we say. And here's another thought, actually. When you're asleep, who are you? Do your stories and memories define you in the same way? There's something fascinating about this idea that our identities might be so fluid. Maybe it's not just a waking state, but extends into every moment of existence. In sleep, we become less and less defined by the stories we tell ourselves. It's as if the self dissolves into a deeper state of being. So, is there something beyond our constructed identities? Something more foundational that remains even when all else fades away? And here's the real question. What do you feel in this quiet space between thoughts and dreams? Is it a sense of peace or something more? Now think about this. When you're in deep sleep, do you still hold on to who you are? Do those stories and memories really matter then? You know what's strange? It feels like they fade away. And that's okay, isn't it? There's something interesting here. In sleep, there's this profound silence, a deep rest where the river of our thoughts slows down. It almost stops flowing. And when you wake up, do you feel like someone different? Or is it just the same old story that resumes? Imagine if sleep was a reset button, not for your entire identity, but for the layers of stories and memories. What would remain? And here's the thing, there's beauty in that rest, in letting go of all the narrative just to be present with the silence. It feels like floating weightlessly. You're not anchored by the past or worried about the future, just being. You know what's amazing? Sleep can be this profound release, a moment of deep rest where all those constructs dissolve. And it's not about losing yourself. It's more like stepping away from the loudness for a bit to find something quieter and deeper within. But then what do we hold on to? What keeps us anchored when all those stories fade? It's almost like sleep is a way to cleanse the mind, to let go of everything that clutters our sense of self, to rest in a deeper, more true essence. Let's think about this idea of night for a moment. Night is that time when everything feels safe and calm, doesn't it? It's like being wrapped in a soft blanket. You know what I mean, right? The darkness outside makes you feel protected, like the world can rest for a bit. And your mind too. It's interesting how we've always seen night as this mysterious time. But maybe it's not so much about mystery as it is about letting go of the day, of everything that made us feel tense and uncertain. So here's a thought. What if this darkness this night is like a reset for your identity? a moment when all those stories and memories fade away. And you know, it feels good to let go. It's like sinking into a warm bath after a long day of walking through mud. The mud washes off, and so do the stories. Imagine floating in this dark water. No more need to hold onto anything, just letting it all dissolve away into the cool night. And what if you're not really losing yourself? What if you're finding a deeper self that's always been there, but hidden behind all those stories and memories? So here's the thing, is it possible to embrace this night, to let go of who you think you are just for a little while, to rest in this dark peace? It's okay if that feels scary. Letting go is hard work, but it's also the start of something new and beautiful. Now think about this, what do you feel when you let all those stories drift away? What remains? Do you still feel like yourself, or is there something else, deeper and more fundamental? And here's where it gets interesting. What if that thing, whatever remains when all the stories fade away, is the real you? It's like standing in front of a mirror and seeing nothing. It's not scary, it's liberating. So here you are floating in the dark, feeling this peace that comes with letting go, knowing there's something deeper still beneath. And as you rest in this night, what do you think about what remains? You know what's strange? It's this feeling we have that there's something enduring, some core self beneath all the layers of stories and memories. But tonight, let's consider if that's just another story we tell ourselves to feel secure. Think about how much you change over time, like a river flowing through the landscape, shaping and being shaped by it. There's no fixed point of identity, just continuous movement and transformation. So what remains when all those stories fade away? When you let go of the notion that there's a constant self at the center of it all? You know, sometimes we look in the mirror and see someone familiar, but other times we might not even recognize ourselves. It's like our reflection is constantly changing. And that's okay because it means there's a fluidity to identity, a natural ebb and flow of who we are from moment to moment. Imagine yourself as this vast ocean. The waves rise and fall, but the ocean itself is always there, even if it's constantly in motion. And so we might ask ourselves, is identity something that can be defined by a series of moments or experiences, or is it more like the water itself? You know what's interesting here? When you strip away all the stories and narratives, there's this sense of just being present, existing in the now. It feels like a kind of freedom to let go of the need for constancy, to accept that we are not fixed entities but ever-changing beings. So tonight, as you drift off into sleep, consider this. What if our essence is just being present in each moment without the need for a constant self? You know what's strange? That after all this journey, we still aren't sure who we are beyond these stories and memories. It's okay though. Letting go of that question is freeing. There's something beautiful about not needing to have all the answers, you know. Like a river flowing without knowing where it will end up. And here's the thing, maybe we don't need to define ourselves at all. Maybe just being is enough. Imagine a vast ocean, so deep and dark that you can't see the bottom. But it's okay because there's no need to know every detail to appreciate its beauty. You don't have to understand everything about yourself to feel at peace with who you are in this moment. It's a gift, really. The mind is a vast landscape of stories and memories, but beneath all that, there's something quieter, something deeper. It's like the sound you hear when you put your ear to a seashell. That's not just the echo of the ocean, it's also the quiet hum of existence itself. So as you drift off into sleep tonight, remember that there's more to who you are than the stories and memories. There's something beyond all that. This dissolution is a release, like water flowing down a mountain. It's not losing yourself, it's finding peace in every moment.